Welcome back to another episode of Build in Public Radio, where startup founders interview startup founders. And today's episode, such a great one that we have in store. We'll be diving deep into next level marketing, adapting to 2023 post-pandemic trends, featuring the one and only James Hamlin. James is a fractional CMO and marketing agency UK director of Ad3. In this session, hosted by my wonderful co-founders and partners of Furlough, Ms. Rosalind Fons and Ophir Gadot. In this episode, we'll be covering some questions like how have consumer behaviors and preferences evolved since the onset of the pandemic, and what are some key trends and patterns marketers should be aware of? With the rise of AI, how can marketers harness the power of automation to optimize their campaigns and enhance customer experiences? As the world transitions into a post-pandemic era, what unique challenges and opportunities do marketers face? What are some effective strategies and tactics for startups and scale-up brands to gain initial traction in today's competitive market? This session is recorded every Thursday to a live audience. It's actually streamed to a live audience at 2 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. So we'll be getting a lot of questions. And if you want to join us, of course, it is in the Discord. Join 20,000 other marketers who come to our Discord and collaborate all the time. And also we host incredible events just like this one. And as always, this event is sponsored by Phygital.wtf. With every purchase of Phygital, you get lifetime VIP access to our incredible Discord. So, without further ado, Mr. Ophir Gadot, Ms. Rosalind Fons, and the one and only James Hamlin, everybody. Build in Public Radio starts
now. Hey, how's it going, Rosalind?
Hello. It's going good. Hi, everyone who is in the live. Happy Thursday. And oh, we have Bret Lucarelli with us. I didn't know we were having Bret.
Oh my God. Let's go. I just want to say, so I stepped in because I thought Bret is not gonna make it, but you're still here. When did it happen, man? What?
Can he hear us? Maybe we
half can hear us. I don't know. But regardless, let's get started. This is Thursday and another Build in Public episode. And the thing about James, so just a short, like the intro from Joe was phenomenal. But for me, the reason I wanted James is because like a few months back, I was kind of challenged with a lot of things relating with furlough marketing. And I was looking in Growth Mentor for mentors that can help me out. I met with a few. I met also with James, and James have been phenomenal. So ever since then, he kind of stayed in my head, and I figured I got to bring him in, man. So hence the reason why James is here. And great to have you here, brother. What's up?
Hello. Hey, amazing to be here. That is quite an intro. I'm blessed and incredibly pleased to receive that. So that's really kind words, Ophir. And yeah, nice to be here. And yeah, really looking forward to it.
Beautiful. James, again, like your experience is huge and massive and obviously. But can you hear us? Are we we're doing this?
Yeah, I can hear you just fine.
Amazing. So I just wanted to ask you something before we get into the post-pandemic and all the transition that is happening right now. A little bit about your role as a fractional CMO, and
Sure.
if you can share a little bit, what is it, a fractional CMO?
Sure, happy to do it. So hi everyone. Interesting media term, and sometimes we have the press to be thankful for occasionally. That somebody created the term, I guess, fractional CMO and fractional executive. And it's really interesting, isn't it, where we are in the market? I guess we'll talk a lot about this today in terms of where we are, in terms of our additional projects that we can take on at any one time. A lot of that is to do with technology and circumstance, but also the kind of market's view on that. And let me give an example. So about 10 years ago or so, was pretty burnt out after the end of a long startup ride. Been in a startup from the first employee for about 6.5 years. And I was working on, decided to work on a couple of other really passion-driven projects. And one of those projects I still advise to this day. But I was very much kind of operating as a freelancer. There was no fractional CMO term. And I felt like the way I was perceived in the market was very different to now. Right? Because back then, some of the bosses that you would have, as soon as they got a whiff or inkling that you were doing anything else that was taking place outside of those four walls, it could be a problem, right? But now, of course, we're in a situation where it's fervently encouraged. So we have a market where people are doing a variety of things, from mentoring to advising to angel investing to non-executive directing to kind of things on the side. A portfolio life is a necessity for some of us in the world we live in, but also massively encouraging. So the fractional CMO world around that basically came around kind of people like myself with significant market experience, helping businesses from a days per week as opposed to being there full time. So it's the ability to get skills of experienced executives, but not having to go through the kind of can be the rigmarole of getting them. Also, what's interesting as well, so I'm connected into groups with many CMOs here in Europe. So probably about the leading 150, 200 tech CMOs in the UK do what I do. And we ran a survey, and the average tenure of a tech CMO we found in the market we're in was 16 months.
Chilling.
Right, it's a pretty chilling statistic, especially when you think about that level of seniority. Certainly out here in the UK, we have very long notice periods, every 6 months or 3 months generally. You've got a hell of a lot of rigmarole involved in that particular procedure, and what can you actually get done in 16 months? And there's lots to unpack from that stat, right? Because around expectation management. So this world that we find ourselves in of being able to crash into businesses. And I'm a little bit different, I suppose, because a lot of my time is I'm the UK director for an ad agency called Ad3. So I spend a lot of my time working with clients in the UK and the US, so I get to see that side of it as well. A lot of my fractional CMOing, I'd say, is much more on the advisory type of end, which is absolutely fine with me. But I think it just illustrates this portfolio of skills, but also portfolio of opportunities as well. But sometimes you need a media term to help kind of like galvanize what you're doing. And, fractional and fractional executives is certainly one. And what you see now is you see the market trying to keep up with it, right? Because I think the sector of the market that's become quite marginalized with the advent of these closed community groups, and you could say furlough fits into that category, has been recruiters. So they are now starting to move much more into this fractional type of world because they're seeing an opportunity there around the matching side of it. So yeah, it's going to be certainly interesting. Again, as I say, if we look at marketing the post-pandemic world, how much fractional executives and workers themselves continue to develop, and how much that world continues to develop. I'm making an assumption that you guys on this panel do other things as well. I mean, I'm imagining you do, and the tools in front of you had the creativity to see that. And I think that's going to be a very interesting thing to see how that market develops over the next few years, because it doesn't seem like we're going to return back to businesses where we're all sitting within four walls, right? But at the same time, businesses are effective because they are businesses, and you have structure and you have people around them and stuff. So it's going to be interesting to see.
For me, it's like you've got businesses that say that they want their employees to have an entrepreneurial mindset, but if they want employees that are entrepreneurial, it's kind of like, well, what did you expect? Did you expect me not to act like an entrepreneur? And if you want that level of talent in your organization, then you have to give some room for them to act like their kind of, I guess, like their ethos. I don't know if that's the right word, but you kind of get what I mean. It just seems like keeping somebody at a certain level that has an entrepreneurial mindset and will actually do the actions, it makes no sense, and you're not going to retain them.
Yeah, it's a challenging time, right? And I think, like you, as you say, you want to be driving those type of actions out of your employees and promoting all these things that you describe. Entrepreneurialism being one of them, and some people are in opportunities where they can be an entrepreneur within a team and or an organization and drive that forward. But you're right, and I think in the current climate where some businesses aren't growing maybe as fast as they were pre the pandemic and don't have as much access to as much ready collateral and cash as they had pre the pandemic, you're right, the challenge they face is how can those types of individuals be retained and be comfortable within an organization that might then be moving at a different speed that you are. I think when the business is growing at the same rate that you want to grow personally and professionally, you have a really, really good fit. And, there's times in your career, and I'm sure all of us will think that there's times when that's been the case and there's times when that's not been the case. But you're right. But for someone who's been part of organizations that have invested into learning and development stipends and training and all the things that never existed when I was starting out, right? It just wasn't a thing, right? You have to do something with these tools, right? That's for sure. It's only kind of so many talks you can attend, but you have to kind of put these things into action. And I think we mentioned growth mentor earlier, and shout to them. I think what they're trying to get organizations to do is to sign up for a subscription themselves. So you can say, like, you have on tap talent to have these conversations with these types of people. And on that platform, I've spoken to multiple different people from the same organization before, and that's pretty interesting.
A question on this: which companies are more in line to get a fractional CMO or a fractional executives? Like, what kind of companies you see that are going in that direction?
So look, from my experience, again, I'm based here in the UK. I work with a lot of clients on the agency side, clients based in the UK and in the US, and also kind of work with clients direct as well. And are part of these communities quite heavily in these conversations every day. What I see in the conversation and the communication that I see is people looking for problems to be solved, right? And that's where it starts and ends. And some of those problems are very short and very quick. And some of those problems often revolve around introductions to people, right? But often it's the ability to just sort of parachute in quickly and fix stuff. I don't see this world where, there's tons of budget sat there in the corner and a palm door winning ad waiting for someone to direct it. I don't see that. I see many more like, right, we need instant expertise and often problems to be fixed or things to try out. So I'd say that larger businesses with more bureaucracy and more red tape may be prohibitive, but also I see like a lot of these executives and executive level hires were always tied into these incremental funding rounds. So it's like, right, we're going to raise this funding, and as a result, first thing we're going to do is splash the cash on these big executives to fix stuff or build stuff or create stuff, and that's absolutely valid. But when you've got less businesses making it to that particular period of time, you need to make kind of faster decisions, right? So again, I wouldn't class myself as the archetypal fractional CMO. I am in my sort of the multiple things that I do, because I'm spend a lot of time across the agency side as well. It's one of the things that I do, and I think fractional executive describes what I do pretty well. But I think it's just it's the mainstream adoption for organizations like that comes with all sorts of challenges, but you start to get into the mechanics of how like C-suites at businesses work, right? And the mechanics and dynamics of that. And then if one of them was around not all the time versus the rest of the time, what would that work? That's quite an interesting one. If I go back at some of the businesses I've been at, and some of my C-level peers were only there a fraction of the time, it is challenging. But again, we're going through unprecedented waters now. We're going for businesses where 4-day working weeks are not that unusual, right? People working fully remotely, where, let's be honest with everyone here, because it's the only way, where companies don't really know what their people are doing when they're not in meetings, sometimes for meeting's sake. So these are new waters, right, for all this type of stuff. And if you look at furlough as well, in terms of the community that you have here, there's a big globalization angle, right? It's like executives sat at an organization would all, in theory, live in the same city. Much
we certainly don't.
Right, precisely.
Yeah, and hey, James, Bret here. I finally got my my audio issues working. I apologize.
Hey, Bret, welcome.
For popping in a couple minutes late there. But yeah, super interested to have a conversation here. And obviously you mentioned pandemic, and we know there's been a shift in maybe how people are making some of their decisions on the consumer side, right? So, you've got the consumer buying maybe different products, or maybe buying different products, maybe even with different purchasing intent. And just kind of looking at things a little bit differently, in their mind, thinking they're going to be at their house from now on instead of out and about. Like, I've even considered transportation differences, right? And things like this. So what's, how do you, from a marketing perspective, like, how do you make that shift, and what kind of tactics or changes or strategies do you really have to employ to think about what people are, either what they're purchasing now or how they're purchasing, how their kind of intent has changed? Are there special strategies or anything that you have to kind of employ and set up to make that, to follow their behavior?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I was chatting to a peer about this today, actually. And in a way, you have to look at the last couple of years, throw 2020 out, right? You've also got to throw 2021 out, right? For probably the opposite reasons, right? Because if you think about it, 2021 was the kind of subscription D2C halcyon absolute rocket ship boom, right? And with players primed to capitalize off that, and that's certainly slowed down a lot in certain verticals. We see it out here in Europe, certainly. D2C, I would say, and the D2C brand landscape, certainly around e-commerce, is absolutely unrecognizable from where it's gone to. And are there enough buyers out there to support that? Because go back to 2021, the world was a different place, but generally people had more money in their pocket than they had in 2023. I don't have the data in front of me, but I'm not going to stop that from making my point. That's generally my take. And look, from a marketing standpoint, as you move forward, look, 2021/2022 proved to us that it's never actually been simpler in the history of basically this planet, and we maybe say this thing every year, to be able to get a web D2C business and service off the ground, as in functioning and trading, with some pretty impressive bells and whistles, right? And that's a lot of that is through the partner integrations, right? Which have now become so much easier and ubiquitous. So Stripe for all your payments, Zapier for all the stuff you have to put together with chewing gum and string, like kind of like everything else from design to everything. So to go from kind of nothing to e-commerce, D2C trading, that's never been easier. And that's fantastic, because where I come from is sort of the opposite, in the fact that getting things that were certainly finessed on the web up and running was harder, because it just was, but getting the traffic and traction was easier. And I think I see a flip now, right, in the fact that not only founders that I speak to, but also trends that I see in the market, where you look at some of these sites and services, you can't really fault them. But now they're in a situation where it's like, well, how do I get those past that first 1,000 loyal customers? You're now in a situation where there is no, apart from the tiny minority, effective media investment, management, spending is absolutely vital, certainly in the world of B2C. And I see this in the agency world on a daily basis, right? And the barriers come from investment, but also the barriers come from that CAC is more important than it's ever been, and trying to show payback periods yielding sooner is more important than it's ever been. Now, it's caveated by the fact that, whereas we still have attribution challenges and attribution hurdles in front of us, but there are some really interesting things working in the background that's helping to clear that. The triple whale type platforms of this world are just real step changes. So I think it's kind of twofold in the fact that, again, you can join this revolution very quickly, and what we may see is lots of the folks who are unfortunately let off during the big tech layoff season. And when you look at the data, it's like majority of them were in the US. Majority of them were for the big 5 or 6 tech companies. A majority of them were in kind of, let's just say, services type roles. So I think if they've then taken the money and the time they have to then enter this kind of world as well, again, it adds to the competition, but also the barriers. So I think, look, it's what's become incredibly important to brands aspirational or starting out in this particular space is this concept of community. And that's not something you would have necessarily said. Now, there's certain brands and products we read about, they have unicorn status. They somehow become cut through this and everyone's using it. It's just, it's unreplicatable, right? But when you think about these brands, it's like, look, if you have the media budgets and the media investments, that's incredible, because you can compete with the eyeballs on, the 3 largest ad platforms that certainly I interact with, Meta, Google, and now TikTok as the ascendant player. You have the ability to spend there from the media standpoint, but you have the community standpoint as well, who are going to be your dedicated 100 to 200 to 300 followers that are going to basically sit at the core. And now, again, like, Furlough is a community platform. It's powered by that. It has incredible tools at its disposal, so they have the ability to do that. But, how do you make it interesting for those 200 to 300 to 1,000 people to want to be part of your community when, look at D2C, it's like becomes so, the slivers are so thin, right? It's like, I was chatting to a great founder the other day who has this really great hot sauce brand, doing all this type of stuff in D2C, and it's incredible. Am I going to want to be on a Discord all day talking about different types of hot sauce? Me personally, no, but some will, right? So then the challenge becomes a lot more micro. So it feels like this Whereas you had more brands competing in that middle space. You have the big guys getting larger, and then the smaller guys on the bottom just kind of getting more disciplined, but then slicing up that pie into kind of like millimeter slices, but then making it make sense for them.
Okay. Yeah. So, and it's interesting, like, as you talk about that, I kind of heard some things I was thinking about. We talk about the way trends happen, right? So I work a lot in the gaming space and the technology space in general, and you see a lot of trends over time. Like, I like to look at games as one example where, 25 years ago, like, as graphics were improving, then older games that had like more rigid and blocky stuff were kind of getting shoved aside because they were old looking. The new stuff was new and everyone jumped on that. Then as time goes on, now it becomes trendy to go back to kind of the retro style stuff, right? Like, that stuff kind of has its heyday again. And generally it's a 30-year cycle. And it's obvious because we know when 10-year-olds become 40-year-olds, they want to enjoy the stuff they enjoyed when they 10 and kind of think about that in the past. And kind of thinking about that from a marketing perspective, I wonder, what you think and how we see the trends on things like the newspaper, right? And obviously we're all going to say, hey, newspaper's dead, newspaper's gone, right? But and that one's even more extreme because this age group didn't really grow up necessarily with the newspaper. So maybe that one's past its time, but there will be, in my opinion, and I'd love to hear yours, James, other forms of marketing and advertising that maybe they become trendy again. When everyone's going online, do you go online with them, or do you decide to do something offline, right? Do you decide to do something in person and like kind of guerrilla tactic almost on the marketing? And I'm curious if there's what you think about being a placement kind of for both, and maybe it's certain industries that need to take that kind of offline tactic, or where's the balance really? That's the question.
Yeah, great question. Look, the trend point is interesting, right? Because we're now asking ourselves, is it a trend or is it a hype cycle? Right. And, I personally, in more of my free time, well, I didn't have any free time when I was doing it, got heavily involved in the NFT space. Heavily involved, right? Not too heavily involved because, as you can see, I still have a roof over my head just about, but it was...
I think you're green screen, so I can't... I see a white wall, but I think it's fake anyway, so I actually have no idea what I'm looking at.
Yeah. So, but at the time, that felt like a trend, but it was clearly a hype cycle, right?
Right.
And you could say, like, the last 20 years of tech, has that been a trend or a hype cycle? It depends on how long you take the kind of historical analysis on it. But you are right. You do need to try to look forward wherever you can, because historically, the people that have been successful have got onto these platforms early, mastered them, and then ultimately spun a business out of it for long enough, right, to get somewhere, investment, event with a merger or something like that. And we've seen that. Certainly in the digital space, it's like there's so many over the years, but I think one that we can probably all remember just about, and this was, I guess the peak of this is probably like 2010, would probably be like the Groupon explosion, right?
Yep.
That was something that hadn't really existed, years prior, and then before you know it, Groupon Super Bowl ads, right? It's like there were people that, if they got out, it's a little bit like NFTs. If you got out at the right time of NFTs, it's a different thing. But I think as marketers, you're now realizing that these windows are getting smaller and smaller, and there's fewer opportunities to, I guess, get in, win, and then get out, right? Because we are trying to build longer, more robust, stronger relationships with our customers, right? Our customers will be here today and tomorrow and in the future, right? That's our endeavor. That's what we're trying to do. So we're looking forward, but to your point, looking back at what works and what has worked in the past and what will continue to remains incredibly important. And we aim to see renaissance in that. And let me give you an example as it pertains to key market I'm very close to here, which is London in the United Kingdom. If you go back a few years, the London Underground system, and most of you, I'm sure, have probably been on it, either as tourists or people living in London. Pre about 2014, 15, the tube car ads that existed on the train, it was not full of businesses that you would consider to be cool, interesting, and engaging. It was a certain type of advertiser, right? Mostly strange kind of like edible vitamin pill stuff, hair transplants, language learning schools, white background ads, text. That was the market, right? And it was like, didn't really see much more of it. Startups and scale ups and tech businesses, through a lot of, and the people on the ends making the decisions of the London transport system, need a lot of credit for that, understood that this was a way that startups and scale-ups could grow, right? So I was fortunate back then to be very heavily involved in advertising on the London Underground, because it was a way out of the digital sphere that we could drive measurable, manageable traffic that we could track, we could attribute, get a CPA back to. It was amazing. And then what happened is it became completely overrun with startups. And you'd make a joke and you'd say, oh, look, so-and-so has just raised a Series A. Oh, how'd you know? I just saw their ad on the tube, right? But they worked, right? They worked.
Right.
But then what happened is that prices started going up because it then becomes a yield game. Fast forward, the reason I bring this up now is, now when you go on the tube, I've never seen more unsold in as long as I can remember looking at or house ads for London Transport, aka unsold. And I know that the prices have been put up to a premium. Surely it can't last. And to your point, that still remains. The opportunity hasn't changed, right, at all. Yes, the market shifted a little bit. I kind of understand that. But, you know, London is a little bit of an outlier. Fridays aren't as busy as they used to be, but the tube is still people. And the ads are still effective because you're sat on a seat looking at an ad. And anybody here that's transitioning it from the New York subway, it's a little bit different. So that opportunity remains. And as we continue to become more concentrated digitally and fight there, the opportunity out in the real world doing something as old as time as putting a physical paper poster in front of someone is really, really effective. And look, I do lots of stuff now in the digital out of home space, the agency, which is fascinating to me, fascinating. What you can do with placements and stuff around cities and things, like, it's so exciting and progressive. But at the same time, when you do that, you don't have a concept of over display, right? You don't have a concept of like, I'm going to buy those ads at the end of the line and those really high places. Why is that? Because I know how big that ladder is. That guy's got to get up to change that ad. So you know what? I know how this thing kind of works. So I think you're right. I think the cycles are real, and we as marketers try to overcomplicate this on a daily basis and try to get more. We're on a constant quest for data, and that's absolutely fine. And we should continue to do this, but we cannot lose sight of our gut instincts for this. And it's pretty simple. It always was. There's been marketing going on since the dawning of time, right? So let's just not forget that as we get more and more complex. Simple things such as the right message to the right person at the right time with the product that they want is all this really boils down to.
Quick question, James. I'm not sure, because I'm also very much in tune with my gut feeling, but also very connected to data. How do you kind of balance them out as a marketer?
Yeah, good question. Look, it's like you say, it's one without the other, right? I think most of us have been sat in meetings, certainly with certain individuals who are like, yeah, you know what? Yes, I know the data says this, but my gut says this, I'm going for my gut. And you know what? That can be frustrating. But I think it's also little things over in the fact that, like, look, you have to understand what's got you here, right? What's got you here is the ability to interrogate data, as in ask the right questions, because we can never ask more questions, right? From a quant and a qual perspective, but also being able to understand that customer and understand what it is that they're really, really looking for, right? And the product that you have in the way that you're going to do it. And so much of that, again, is something that isn't going to go away. We have so much data at our fingertips and the ability to get it, and it's absolutely fantastic. But it feels like for every person that you hire that's going to be crunching through data at a high level, you kind of need to be hiring somebody that's just going to be just talking to customers at the same time with the same velocity, right? And it's how those two things become unified is hopefully where your answer is going to lie.
I like that. I like that.
Yeah, and I wonder, and you kind of maybe marginally touched on it. It's something that's been really here, in the news, and a lot of companies have dealt with it a lot. Kind of relating to like core values and maybe ethics of a company. So, you see a lot. There's been, like I said, there's been a lot of press, and especially in the US, a lot of brands that have taken hits maybe because they said certain things. And then, when you do that, it's like you're isolating half of your audience, and then the other half is loving it, right? It becomes politics at that point. And, they say things like, hey, no press is bad press, but you see things that happen when companies' valuations go down and things like that. But, where's the place for that? Is it something that, is it a marketing strategy to really use something that is a core value that maybe, like family, for example, which is a generic core value, something that can attract your users and consumers? Or, is there just no place for it? This is really an opinion piece, right? But curious kind of what your opinion is on these types of things.
Wow. Okay. This is a wonderful question. It has been interesting, hasn't it? That's the
best way to put it. And it's always, and it's been like that. It seems like more so lately, although it really always has been, but now it's so easy to access information, and it just passes so quickly with social media. So I think it's just kind of exacerbated the decisions, essentially.
Look, you're right. And you just to go back to go forward around it. If you look at it at its core, you're talking about a brand's brand values as exported by a marketer and the team and what it does, right? And that product, you'd expect the brand's values to talk about what that product could be, right? So if it could be, I don't know, your favorite type of bread, right? You would be really interested in, like, what, tastes good, it's healthy, bread is healthy or not, whatever. Like, it's good, it does the things I want it to do. No one's hope no one's really getting treated that badly, but the price is right, makes sense. This is what I all understand. I'm aligned with that. Mm-hmm. Certain brands have then over the years really lent into it, and often that's come from very public facing founders, or kind of like, or the products that they'll be. And what they've tried to do over years, certainly using mediums such as cable television, is to position that brand as like the additional member of the family, right? So it's like, this ketchup is like, it's like your fifth child, right? There it is. It's just all part of it. It's all part of it. And it's fun and reflective when you think back. And a lot of these brands have been the absolute fiber of, certainly, countries like the United States, right? Because they've just been pushing consumerism, right? More than most markets in the Western world have been. And these brands have been at that table, McDonald's or Heinz or whoever it may be. Then fast forward, it comes back to your ketchup. You're now, even if you don't want to know, you're now being told ad nauseum your favorite ketchup's opinions on incredibly complex, divisive issues of the day. And sometimes you turn around and you're like, well, when did that happen? Right? Like when did this become relevant to me, and when did that happen? And that's not to belittle any of these causes, debates, positions on things whatsoever. That's a separate podcast. But you're right. It's like now it's brand as I guess an activist is now ubiquitous for a lot of people. And again, have those brands delivered more value to their customers, their shareholders, their employees, their partners by doing more of this? I couldn't say. I don't have that data in front of me. But I do know, as you say, and I'm not a politics follower, so I can't really give you an opinion on it because it's not something that I follow at all or think about at all.
Same.
It doesn't really affect my life.
Yeah.
But I can imagine it then becomes this blurred political debate, left versus right, red versus blue, during on these certain issues of the day, with people from brands getting involved. So right now in the United Kingdom, we had the biggest story this week that has been like there's a ex-MP who a bank brand cancelled his account because they didn't agree on what he thinks about certain things. That is now the story of the day. And, that's interesting because it's like a case of, well, is that brand then saying, like, and you could say on a lot of these issues, call it 50-50, 70-30, whatever it is. I don't really trust opinion polls. You are then proceeding to alienate a decent percentage of your customer base. But then it's also a question of, does your brand need to take political statements on anything? Depends on the brand, I suppose. And it depends what you're looking for it, I suppose. Some feel like they do, some feel like you should. But also at the same time, we've seen folks come out, certainly in the tech and digital space, recently, in recent years, and say, look, we're just not going to Brian Armstrong at Coinbase was probably one of the most famous, and there's probably been others, I'm not really sure, kind of come out and said, look, you know what, we support our employees, get it, we understand, but this isn't going to be something that we really, really push as a business because of its divisive nature. And yeah, it's interesting how we've got here, and it's going to be interesting to see where we go. But again, I also go back to your previous point, Bret, around hype cycles and trends. Will this still be something that these brands will be doing in a few years down the line? Difficult to say, because they'll probably be maybe looking at the data and actually sort of saying, look, you know what, this is something we're going to do. But also as well, like, did a lot of these brands support these causes and just didn't tell us about it on a 24 hours a day basis?
Right.
I can only speculate. I couldn't say. But yeah, it's certainly become part of the conversation for sure. And certainly the way that we perceive brands, now that we know this more about them, is potentially affecting our judgment. Whether we shop with them or whether we don't, it's, I guess that sort of adds to that.
It's like they took idea anchoring too far, at least some of them. Like, I don't know about you, but I feel like you should always go for like the long-term play rather than this like hype bandwagon, because even if, like, let's say you're jumping on the hype bandwagon for a certain cause, but you don't actually believe in the cause, you're just jumping on it, people can really see through that.
Well, you're right, and that's the hard thing, isn't it? Because again, you talk to a lot of brands, and again, and I guess it's easier as you become smaller. It's like authenticity is one of these key brand values that they're going through, and I would say that to anybody, and especially some of the examples that we talked about, people trying to break through in the D2C world, where there's 50 derivatives of what you do. Your authenticity in terms of your story is going to be what defines you. And as you say, if you authentically believe in this, and that's a hill that you'll die on if you choose to, then you know what? I really respect that. But as you say, it's not. It's this pick and choose world, which, and again, people are starting to see through it. And I think, unfortunately, as you say, you end up in a different place where it all just becomes like wallpaper, and then it didn't kind of achieve it anywhere. And then you have a tiny vocal minority on social media platforms making demands that brands should do these types of things. Stop listening to them. They'll go away. Right? They will go away. They'll find someone else to listen.
It's the flip-flopping for me, right? And even like on the authenticity standpoint, I don't know if you saw, there was this big trend going on TikTok where it was like de-influencing, and people like just influencers and normal people taking products that were actually kind of crap and actually being honest about it. And I think that, at least like from my kind of view, I suspect there's going to be way more of this type of stuff. And I'd love to hear from you. Do you think that the quality of products, and like bearing in mind, obviously there's different price points of products, and you know, you can only achieve a certain amount of quality for each price point. Do you think that the quality will have to go up based on these trends?
I think if you're trying to drive a high price point and you're trying to differentiate, it feels like you probably need to aim of one of two positions. It's like aim for the top or aim for the bottom, right? But you could set up, and it would be incredibly difficult to do it, but you could set up a business, selling, thousands of these batteries, right, for half a cent better than anybody else, right? And that's incredible. Right. It's so much of a challenge around that, right? Or you could go towards the high end and be like, right, different type of customer, different type of purchase behavior, different type of positioning. But that's where you see it's like, right, that person is going to pay a lot more for it, but personal touch, authentic, velvet rope, right? It's not going to be everybody, because certain things, we as consumers, I'm happy to pay as little as a battery is probably a good example. Mm-hmm. Battery's a battery. I'll pay as cheap as I can for these batteries because my kids use them. Versus, as you say, certain products, even in these economic trying times, goes back to the authentic point. And this is why we're compelled to give our money to Patreons, support founders, support causes, support people trying to do these types of things, because we can see it, right? And again, if you look at the power that a small business has versus an Amazon, it's unrecognizable. And, they have to get there some way, and they're not going to get there on price, right? So you have to respect that.
Mm-hmm. So it's a race to the top or a race to the bottom, right? That's how we always put it.
Like
race to the bottom. Yeah. We're actually seeing it right now. I'm in the racing simulation space, and we're actually seeing it right now with steering wheels. There's been a race to the bottom, and the big players have gotten involved. So one company came in and undercut the price, and then the next one did it. Logitech is now involved. I mean, it has just become a race to the bottom, and that's now an alternate product to the top, right? It's essentially two different products. So they're targeting a different customer with a race to the bottom than they are to the top. So like you're saying, it's a different customer, and it's a different race, right? But you kind of have to decide, are you racing to the top? Or are you racing to the bottom? So are you going after value, or are you going after value in a different kind of value? Are you going after, top quality, or are you going down to the value side of things? Decide which race you're running. We have a question that just came in. Let's ask that, I think, because I think this is a really good question that I don't think quite got answered. And I think it's about some of these divisive topics. We have I've been a part of a brand that I don't want to say was pressured, but maybe there were some questions internally of like, hey, are we going to make a statement on this? Like, what's our, should we say what we're thinking as a brand? And I guess the question is, what do you do as a brand in that case? What do you do from a marketing perspective? You mentioned someone who basically said, from Coinbase, and he said, hey, we're just not going to talk about it. Does he make a statement saying we're not going to talk about it? And is that worse? Like, what's the answer there?
Yeah, good question. And again, I will, just to be clear, this is just my own thoughts on it, and not something that I'm super experienced about. Dealt with some interesting comms challenges over the years, but points like this, look, I think it's about, if you're able to have free and open conversations with the stakeholders that are required, right, from staff to board to key customers, and understands what your participation should be, then that's important, right? And the thought process of what it should be, everybody is different, right? And again, it's like, what calls should a brand weigh into? What calls shouldn't a brand weigh into? Again, as you say, it's difficult because now everything becomes overly politicized, no matter what you say.
Right.
Apart from these things that you look at and you sort of say, well, look, okay, we should all be unified on this particular point. We'd like to think, but again, everything, it feels like it's never been harder to get it right because you've just got people waiting for you to get it wrong. But I think, look, it's about looking at your values, looking at your customers, looking at the type of business that you want to be, right? And understanding how you stay aligned with that. And then realize, like, I think that, you know, lots of people want to, feels like a lose-lose situation. I mean, difficult to say, right? But again, it's like I interact with brands and on the quality of the product and the quality of the service.
Sure.
Not how they respond to certain things on certain times, but then also I kind of understand how the world works as well, and often realize that there's some people in some customer-facing positions on a lot of these really big brands got a really tough job, right? You know, if you're running the social channels for whoever starts trending in the next 5 minutes, let's be honest with you, you know, you're probably going to be somebody, if you're operating the social console, somebody that's on the lower experience end. It's a tough job. Like, how do you handle that? Like, not sure. Absolutely not sure, especially because of all the challenges that come with it, and the people that are just waiting for you to say the wrong thing, often unintentionally. So it doesn't seem like a net positive thing.
Right.
I mean, I think you can do it. I mean, as a brand, you can say whatever you want. Worst case, oh, we just dismissed our previous social media manager, and
I think
it
that
wasn't in line
line
with
gets
the
used
brand voice.
way
was
more
gonna
often
say,
than
how-
it
so-
actually
Shift
happens.
in a different direction, you know.
So throw the question back to you. Where do furloughs sit with these types of things?
I mean, I don't think we needed to address them. We're kind of in the middle spot and how we stand and trying to connect people. So we're not really required. We weren't required to take that stand. But what I'm seeing, and let's be honest, I see it also with political parties. And I've done some political marketing before. It's very easy for everybody, you know, to throw a scapegoat under the bus and say, this was not us if it goes south. And
It was an intern. He got fired. Yeah.
exactly.
It's always an
Oops,
intern. Always. Yep.
typo.
Yeah. For sure.
So there are ways to not take responsibility, and I think also the situation now where people are bombarded with news and like a lot of captions and a lot of shit that you can run away from it pretty easy.
Yeah, like I think so. And back to a previous point, it's like if you're focused on those stakeholder and customer conversations of it's going to be an effective rudder, right? Because you're going to have a fairly decent temperature gauge around what you should be focusing on and what you should be delivering and what these people want. And I think that's what you have to prioritize, and, you know, always keep at the forefront of your mind in what you do every day, because this is why you're here, to serve those people.
Yeah. So we're coming up on the closing minutes here, but I feel like there's one topic that's been so trendy this year that you just can't really ignore it. I'm just kind of curious on your thoughts on the AI stuff,
Okay.
and where that fits in and whether that's being used. I see the same trend that we kind of talked about earlier, where you go There's going to be a race for everyone to use it, first to use it, and then everyone's going to be using it. And then the race is going to be the opposite way. Hey, we're not using AI. We read everything ourselves. And that's going to be kind of almost like a marketing tactic in a sense. Where do you feel this fits in? Is now the time to get on it? Is it too late, too early? And how do you use it?
Yeah, great question. Look, my fundamental beliefs as a person is that tech should be an enabler, not a replacer. I just believe that, and all the things that I do align with that. And is this technology a great enabler? Absolutely, but it's also, the timing is perfect, right? Because it fills an absolute empty space where there isn't that much else going on, where it just drives into it. But it also hits on all the media touch points. So like, nice bit of paranoia, we'll chuck that in there. Nice bit of George Orwell, we'll chuck that in there. Nice bit of kind of like people are getting laid off, we'll chuck that in there. Like it's perfect, right? It's perfect for it. And, you know, dominates the headlines, dominates the landscape. And look, I try to keep up with the tools, try to play with them where I possibly can. Sometimes I find myself, it's harder work to actually use the tools than it is to not use the tools in this particular instance. But it's like anything in its initial infancy, right? It doesn't, you know, the first web browser is not like what we're on now. Look, there's the marketing and growth sphere, there's always going to be a FOMO, I look smart, this is what I know element. And that's just been the way it's kind of been. And I think, again, it goes back to this authenticity standpoint. Like, if you're trying to raise money, is it going to help to put some sort of AI on terms of what you do? Probably, because that's just the way that it goes. But again, the crazy thing is that machine learning, if you want to call it, or, you know, algorithmic things, been going on for a while. But I think it's a little bit like the fractional CMO initial point, right? Needs a sort of like trendy part, and then we kind of put it to the fore. So look, it's not something I think about massively, but we do have to realize that these jobs they won't exist, right? In some of the jobs that people get paid very well today, maybe too well, that's come to opinion, simply won't exist. And if your eyes are closed to that fact, then I would say open them. And to sort of say you're not going to use the tech, you use it today, right? It's like you use predictive texting. Like when Gmail fills out the emails for you, like it's kind of handy, right? Is it going to completely write your emails for you? Not completely, but it might do. But it's like a case of, yeah, again, it's just, if you try to follow every story, it will be challenging. But I also appreciate, if you're in a large organization, you're probably getting a fairly unique push and pull from your boss, who may be the CEO at the top, going, right, what's your AI strategy to drive growth? And then you have your CFO going to you, what's your AI strategy to save money? And you're stuck in the middle going, not sure. And that's a tough position. Both applicable. But, you know, I've seen some good examples and some people doing some interesting things. And I also think that the people that are really making the most of some of the tools out there were probably using slightly more basic versions of those tools anyway, and now just using this to do it faster, if you see what I mean. I think those are the people that have probably got on it for now in the short term.
Love it, man. A question from Discord. In a newsletter I'm subscribed to, and we'll finish with that as we have 1 more minute left. In a newsletter I'm subscribed to, they mentioned something very interesting about AI. They mentioned how people who want to win in the field want to be a category of one. You want to be the go-to for a specific field, but AI is a category of many, and it is so saturated in such a short time. So just wanted to hear your take on this comment, if you don't mind. I have a lot to say of it as well.
Yeah, I mean, the category of one stuff, that ship seems to have sailed. in terms of where we are. And again, I think AI will be so ubiquitous because, again, the hype cycle will be around for a while.
Mhm.
AI brought to you by McDonald's or Sure Deodorant, right? No, just because.
Yeah,
And then
yeah.
it would just
McDonald's
become
suggests
like,
which burger you're gonna like based on which deodorant you wear. I mean, like, hey, maybe there's some correlation there.
Love it.
no, precisely, right? But that it would just become one of these things where it's just like,
It's
right,
a buzzword at
now,
that point. Yeah.
now I go into McDonald's. I don't talk to the teller behind the counter. I punch my thing into a machine. Go, okay, right. I do that now. So they got rid of someone doing the serving.
Yep.
And certainly in this country, they're not inundated with people that want to do that serving. But then the next time you go in there, it's the next logical step is hold my phone up, right? I know what you did for your next 10 orders. I predict for this order, you're going to have X.
Right.
That's AI, right? That's kind of, right? It's not.
I see you're at McDonald's. Would you like me to order a blah, blah, blah? I mean, I get in my car and my phone does that every time. It's like, it's 21 minutes to the place you normally go this day at this time. And I'm like, thanks, I guess. That's where I'm going. I mean, Google's
which is
been
an
doing
example of
this for
an
years.
enabler, right?
Correct.
It's an example of an enabler, but when it stops becoming an enabler, that's different. Ofer, your thoughts, please.
I mean, man, I think it's gonna be like, like we say, internet in a way. It's gonna be the basis of everything, how everything digital works. So we can't say a category of one in AI. I think it's gonna be more like, okay, analytics AI dominant, or research AI, or writing AI, or presentation AI. It's gonna be so segmented to specific needs, but I'm sure you will see AI in accounting. Like, I know it's getting there already. I know the AI is getting into legal, and it's making a revolution in legal. I know in documentation, what AI is doing is crazy. In research, we all hear what's going, like AI becoming a standard for how you do research and how you calculate like and you draw conclusions. In medical, it's absurd. So I think it's more about understanding that AI is going to be everywhere, and yes, it's going to be saturated, but I do see market leaders in specific spaces. So this is where it's gonna go.
Yeah, I agree. So, James, thanks for jumping in. I mean, I love this AI talk. We'd love to kind of talk about this for a long time. But before we head out, I think Rosalind maybe has an announcement about what we have coming up next week, right, Rosalind?
I do indeed.
I mean,
so next
Rosalind runs
week,
a member roundtable. If everyone wasn't aware.
yeah. So you'll see me next week. We'll be back on August the 2nd, Wednesday at 2 p.m. EST for our usual roundtable. We're going to be chatting all about marketing strategies and fundamentals. So I hope to see everybody there if you can catch it. I think we will be doing a replay just in case you miss it. So you'll be able to tune into that. And it should be a good one.
Yeah, that's going to be huge. I know we have Ophir, Lawrence, Mike, PJ, Laura, Trevor, Erica, Jacob. I know we have a really big roster coming to that one, so definitely looking forward to it. So,
can Restream handle it?
What's that?
Restream handle it? That's the question. If Restream can handle this shit.
I hope so.
Yeah, Rosalind, before we go, any last thoughts here? Any last questions for James or anything before we let him back out into the world?
Oh, last questions. Oh, I do have one. How do you find, at least down in London, that mall experiences are going in the UK? Because for me in Scotland here, I see it going two ways. It either dies a death, right? Because all the stores can't handle the rates, they're closing down, there's nothing going on. But the ones that are winning, in Scotland at least, they're doing all of these like really interactive in-store experiences where there's like, makeup tables, you can try this stuff on, virtual makeup, even like experiences where you can take your kids to do activities that the actual malls put on to drive traffic. How have you found it in London?
Wonderful question. So I don't live in London anymore. I live just north of. I go to London weekly for business and have a few clients that are in those malls that you described. And for me, it's pretty fascinating. in the fact that, look, these places seem to be generally as busy as they have been. I haven't seen the stats in terms of like the cash register side of it, but as you say, leaning into experiences like consumerism appears to be live and well. It could be it's the thing that's clinging on with its fingernails, very tightly. Now it's not. Now it's kind of, as you say, these things you can buy online, different for apparel and stuff that you want to kind of try on. But as you say, these experiences that people are leaning onto, and it's interesting, isn't it? The fact that we talked about the D2C side of things, where there's lots of people trying to do incredible things on D2C, but also fighting as hard to get their product in these stores as well, because it becomes part of that experience. And people of a certain age, they will understand if you describe a retail experience at Selfridges, that you could get the product cheaper, but it's the sights, the sounds, the smell, all that type of thing that's around it, which when it wanes, when it goes away, when it changes, difficult to say. But I think it's still very interesting for people to be out there interacting with your brand in the real world. And we still see brands paying a lot for that. So look, pretty hard to replicate online, I would say.
I think so. I've even seen brands start to bring in more sort of digital techniques into their stores. So, for example, there's this, I'm sure you know the brand New Look. It's very much targeted to young sort of teenage girls. I walked past that store one day and I'm seeing this big, like, you know how you get those tacky spin wheels, the pop-ups? I'm seeing like a live one in their store and you can spin it and it might give you a discount, and like stuff like that. For me, I just find like so cute, but it must work to get people in the store. Like I felt like going in even though I wasn't their target customer. So you never know. I guess like for retail spaces, I think if they don't do that, they'll die a death, in my personal opinion.
Yeah, and look at Ad3, the agency that I work for. We're fortunate enough to do a lot of stuff in the beauty space, and it's a category, man, that continues to be at the forefront of this particular world, right? And continues to do incredible things. And I'm not surprised you look are involved in it. It's not just the clients that we work for. I was in a crazy installation with Benefit Cosmetics the other day. It's again, if you're someone who doesn't follow the cosmetics world, and I haven't always, it's not something you would necessarily realize to be like, but like, yeah, that these people understand the ability to feel the texture of the brush or actually see the gloss on the texture of it. That's what they're selling, right? That's what they're absolutely selling.
Yeah.
So yeah, I don't see that going away anytime soon.
Yeah, these experiences will evolve, and I'm sure it exists, but I haven't seen it yet. You go in, you're in a clothing apparel store, and you stand in front of a mirror, but instead of a mirror, you push some buttons, and it shows you wearing that particular item. You can normally you go in there and you try something on, and you look in the mirror, right? Well, if you go in and instead of physically having to try it on, then you're able to kind of interact with it, look at it, what it's going to look like, you get to see yourself. I mean, those types of experiences seem like no-brainers that we'll be moving to in the future.
I think it's you're not gonna get to the store anymore. Your Facebook is gonna be, or your IG is gonna be a feed of you wearing stuff that other people liked.
Well, it's just filters that you can do. You can already go on Snapchat and Instagram and put these filters in and change the way you look. But I think that the store can create an experience that's even still above that. They just have to be aware of this. And I mean, if I can if I can download a free app and have that experience on the free app, then there should be a way to implement that in real life and make it an even better experience. So you'll just have to see a lot of adaptation, I think, in the physical space in order for them not to go by the wayside, not to wane. And they will at some point wane. And then it will, again, the trend will come back around where being able to touch and feel it again will be a bigger part of it. So, you kind of want to be at the forefront of those trends and pay very close attention to your specific market and product and make sure you're ahead of it. So yeah, it's a good question. Good line of question, Rosalind. So thanks for joining, Rosalind. Ophir, again, it's about that time. It's past that time. This is a great talk. So anything to add before we take off?
I mean, James, just appreciate your time today. Good to have you, man. Always a pleasure.
Thank you.
For sure.
Thank you.
Yeah,
I really appreciate it. You're one of the people I've really appreciated meeting. So Take care.
Yeah, is there a place where people should find you, James? Is there a social media place or anything, or you just want to hang out in your little brick wall room there and
Find me
not have
at the
anybody
bar.
find you?
No. LinkedIn is the best place to find me on
Okay.
LinkedIn. So James Hamlin on
Yeah, well,
LinkedIn. You'll find me.
Awesome. We'll make sure that's posted. Well, thanks for your time, man. It was a pleasure. It was a great fun. So appreciate everyone's time. And you know what? We'll